Issue 32. We start off right in the middle of the action with Sally falling off a cliff because a SWAT-bot cut her rope with a laser in an ambush. Fortunately, she's immediately caught by Tails flying down to save her. So that was anticlimactic and led nowhere. Sonic wonders how the robots knew that they were up on the mountain for some reason. They could have just been a random wandering army that stumbled on them instead of just knowing that they were up there. But then it's revealed that they found them because they tracked them with a robot dog, who used to be Sonic's dog before he was roboticized. It's sweet that they show Sonic being with the dog in a flashback. It really humanizes him having a pet, and Mutsuki saving his life once was a nice little detail. I also really like the concept of a robot tracking Sonic through scent. It's very unique. The reason Mutsuki stops instead of attacking him along with the rest of the SWAT-bots is that Uncle Chuck called off the attack because he still has access to Eggman's secret codes and equipment. See, this makes a lot more sense hacking into Eggman's technology than Nicole being used as a magic wand to do it. At least it makes somewhat of sense that former robot Eggman would have access to technology and stuff, that he would leave his base while making off with a whole bunch of his equipment. Uncle Chuck explains that tragically Mutsuki is now Sonic's most dangerous foe because he knows his scent better than anyone's. And Sonic naturally goes into denial about this because he had such an attachment to it. It's strange that it took Eggman this long to think to put Mutsuki to use like this. Antoine tumbles down a snowy hill for the sake of comedy relief and finds a caveman frozen in a block of ice. Okay, so what I'm guessing happened to the caveman is that this place, the place below the cliff that Antoine's friends are looking down at him from, used to be a lake. And the caveman fell into the lake and it froze over time. But even that doesn't make sense because why the hell would the caveman have frozen in this position? He's just standing there as if nothing happened to him. He's not scared or worried or anything. It looks less like he got frozen in a natural occurrence and more like he got hit by a freeze ray from Mr. Freeze. This is really stretching suspension of disbelief. And that's all with me being expected to believe that the freedom fighters will be able to unthaw him, return him to life perfectly fine after his cells had long since died of frostbite. Not to mention lack of oxygen. After Uncle Chuck reminds the audience that he's a genius by somehow knowing the scientific name of a caveman, even though his field of expertise is in engineering and not cavemanology, well, I guess his genius can have multiple interests. We get a weird role reversal where it's Sonic who says they should leave the caveman here just in case, and it's Rotor who says that helping him is the humane thing to do. This is strange considering that when they first met Bunny, they were in the opposite position. It was Sonic who wanted to help Bunny because he was the more emotional one, and Rotor who wanted to leave her behind just in case it was too much of a risk. This really seems like an out-of-character moment for Sonic. Rotor takes the caveman home and explains that the glaciator he captured from Robotnik somehow also works in reverse, and he's adjusted his components to melt the ice around Moby. At first the issue seems to be trying to portray the de-thawing realistically by having it take days to complete, but then we have Sonic accidentally have all the de-thawing happen right away, and the caveman is perfectly fine instead of dead from being boiled alive by being warmed back up too quickly. The caveman, being primitive and stupid, panics at seeing a bunch of unfamiliar people around him talking a language he can't understand and starts wrecking the place, assuming he's surrounded by enemies. At least now they're having it make sense instead of a caveman knowing Sonic's language, like with all the prehistoric beings Sonic talked to when he was sent back to the caveman times. I like how Antoine still tries to be brave and protect the princess even though he's scared, rather than immediately running away like a coward, but running away would have been the smart thing to do in this situation. The situation's resolved when Bunny's actually allowed to be useful for once, throwing the caveman up a tree with her super strength until he'll calm down. Everyone immediately regrets helping the caveman, saying that he'll wreck Knothole. I'm not sure why Antoine got the words librarian and barbarian confused, when it's a native French speaker. You know what the French word for barbarian is? Barbare. It's so similar that there's absolutely no reason a French speaker would be confused over this. After Rotor suggests that the caveman is just experiencing some culture shock from being in modern times, Bunny figures that because the caveman was holding a paintbrush, a caveman paintbrush hopefully, maybe art is the way to communicate with him. I'm glad Bunny's allowed to be useful yet again by being the one to figure this out, even though anyone, including Tails, could have done this. Drawing pictures to communicate with someone who doesn't speak your language is pretty much a no-brainer though. Even the ancient walkers did it for Knuckles. So it was unnecessary to add in the detail that the caveman was a painter to justify this, even if it was adding at least a little depth to his backstory. Unfortunately, the caveman sees the picture Bunny drew and is reminded of his family, who had all died in prehistoric times, and goes to try to find them because he doesn't realize what's happened to him. Sonic decides it'd be best for everyone to keep the caveman being roboticized and thus used against him, and rescues him by spinning around in place to create a tornado when he's shown a whole bunch of times that he can create a tornado just by running. Well, that's not to say this move has no use to it, because it's a version of the tornado attack that he could do in very tight spaces. And I like the added detail that he can't do it if he's had a big lunch. Obviously he'd get sick if he did. I like that Sonic gets some slapstick for once, by having him run into a wall and get put in daze from making himself dizzy from his earlier move. Although again, Sonic, who spins around all the damn time, shouldn't be able to get motion sickness. Sonic gets cornered by Muskie at the worst possible time and the caveman tries to help him, having finally gotten it through his head that Sonic is on his side. I like how clever the caveman was with his plan, having actually used the rope to swing over to the dog in a surprise attack, and using a giant stone rather than simply rushing up to him and clubbing him. And then Sonic uses a Chekhov's gun by communicating to him through a picture that it's actually his dog. Good thing the caveman believes him instead of being confused as hell. I guess he decides to just go with it because he's in such a strange new world with robots everywhere. The caveman showing compassion for the knocked out robot dog is pretty sweet. Helps to kind of redeem his character from purely an annoyance a tiny bit. It sure is convenient that the dog got knocked out though. Fortunately, Uncle Chuck, being a brilliant engineer, is able to restore Muskie's free will. And Sonic loves the dog enough that he still appreciates getting affection, despite it not looking cute and friendly anymore. You'd think he'd be terrified being licked by it. And then the Freedom Fighters drop the caveman off in a jungle because it's the closest place to his natural environment. It makes sense. Although, I hope he doesn't end up getting roboticized or killed from the robots that might come strolling by or have his jungle destroyed. That's the only concerns I have, though. He's a caveman who's very obviously already used to living outside in the wilderness. So this is less like abandoning a person in the wilderness, and more like bringing an animal back to its natural habitat. He'll be fine, as long as he doesn't run into too much trouble with robots. I don't really care all that much, though. I find it really hard to believe that not even Robotnik and his robots know about this Mobian jungle, since you'd think that Robotnik would know about every part of the world, due to satellite mapping and geographers and all. So I'm not really reassured by that. Also, him calling it a Mobian jungle is confusing. Shouldn't he just call it a jungle? He's talking as if he's not from Mobius. And the story ends with the caveman accidentally breaking the paw of Muskie and allows the attempt at humor that makes no sense. As Sonic and the robot dog aren't panicked and terrified at the dog's loss of a limb, Sonic isn't annoyed that Uncle Chuck now has to reattach it, and I'm wondering why the robot dog was so flimsily made that he can be torn apart that easily. I guess the caveman has super strength just because he's a caveman, even though our bodies from the caveman days haven't really changed all that much, aside from like the brain advancing. So cavemen wouldn't have super strength. The second story has the guy who captured the Knuckles Chaotix group tell them that they won't have needed their special abilities, and they just have to wait for Knuckles to show up. So I guess this guy has been stalking and spying on all of them to know all this stuff. The door opens up, and as I guess, it's Archimedes after all. So again, I have to ask, why was he able to send a robot of Eggman's after Mighty in Knuckles Chaotix special? Maybe a robot of Eggman's just showed up by coincidence, but it was implying that all the villains sent after the Knuckles Chaotix group were sent by Archimedes, not Eggman. So that would be one heck of a coincidence. And the story just ends. So again, this should have been a part of the actual big story it was leading up to. It can't stand on its own. It's too short. Nothing happens. The final story continues where Rotor left off, having received a distress call from his family and been knocked into the water. And again, I'm wondering how he hasn't drowned from being unconscious under the water and therefore breathing under it. but through the power of bullshit, he manages to survive, and finds one of the displaced Arctic Mobians again. Why is this guy French anyways? France is nowhere near the Arctic. I guess one of his parents is from France while the other raised him in the Arctic? A cup of tea. Isn't that a British thing? And Chinese, but still, I wouldn't associate tea with the French. I like how he is French though, it at least tries to give him a distinct quirk, if not a distinct personality, because they still can't name any personality trait of his, other than his has a French accent. It's a good thing they explained how he was able to lift Rotor out of the water since he's so heavy. The polar bear guy saved him. I like how it's explained that Rotor's trademark hat was actually a gift from his mom, so it had sentimental value to him. And seeing it after the guy recovers it for him reminds Rotor of why he came to the Arctic in the first place. For some stupid reason, the French guy insists that he and his friends can't help Rotor because they live far away, even though they're right smack dab in the middle of the Arctic. That's not far away. And the polar bear guy annoyingly grabs and threatens Rotor instead of understanding why he'd be upset. Fortunately, they actually do decide to help. What was the point of making an excuse not to then? They sneak into Eggman's Arctic base by bursting out of a Trojan horse, which logically fooled the robots but not Eggman. Rotor brags that one of the Arctic freedom fighters with no personality. Well, I say that, but the polar bear is short-tempered. And the French guy's at least French, so there's at least more distinctiveness in these guys than in all the other freedom fighters. But again, after Eggman's told that Celia, whoever that is, has wired this fortress to explode, Eggman sends the hypnotized walruses after them. And the polar bear's solution is to trap the walruses on Ice Floe Island, where hopefully they don't end up starving to death or dehydrating. Are they still able to fish in this state of mind? It's a good thing Rotor thinks to throw one of his electronic trackers onto the ice floe so that he'll be able to find them again. But why did he even have one of those on him in the first place? That was pretty convenient. The main story was written by Angelo, and I liked it, even if the caveman actually being able to survive and being frozen in that exact standing position was hard to believe. I like how they were able to wrap up both plot points and resolve them by having the caveman save Mutsky and having Mutsky regain his free will. And I also liked how Bunny got to be useful, although the drawing pictures things was a no-brainer and anyone could have thought of that, but the use of Chuckle's gun was still good. The Knuckles Chaotic Group story was written by Mike Kantovac and Ken Penders, and again it's too short to work on its own. All these stories following the story arc should have been part of one big story that would have been much more cohesive and easy to follow. There's nothing to say about this, it's too short, just confused as hell from a lack of information. And the final story was written by Mike Gallagher, and again, I kind of liked it. I'm glad the Arctic freedom fighters got to be useful, along with Rotor, and have a moment in the sun, and I can definitely compliment them at least having two distinct memorable people in the group, even if they still have shallow personalities. But Rotor's story ended with a pretty bittersweet and inconclusive ending, which really left a sour taste in my mouth. Especially when the text at the bottom of the final panel basically tries to blackmail the audience into forever never resolving this cliffhanger if the fans won't write in to ask for it. That's just dickish of them. Not to mention that in a story meant to give Rotor a little more backstory by showing his family and place of origin, they never bothered to explain why he left the Arctic in the first place. And again, his family being hypnotized by a neuron bomb detonating and not killing them for some reason was really convoluted and stupid. And then being roboticized instead would have worked out a lot better for making sense.